Check. Test 1, 2. All
Test
right.
work through.
Yeah, can you hear yourself?
I could. Yes.
Cool. Bro, we're in it. Josè Cabrera, welcome.
Thanks, man.
And no relation to Ryan Cabrera, right?
No, or Miguel Cabrera that plays for Major League Baseball.
My wife saw Cabrera, the last name. She got all stoked. I'm like, no, it's not
The pop star.
not the pop star. That was one of her favorites, Ryan Cabrera.
That was like a shooting star that went so dim so quickly.
It's so common.
Yeah.
I just saw a crazy video the other day of like all the one-hit wonders from the 2010 era. And
Thousands.
I wonder what that is, where it's like you get a hit, because some people are so talented. They fight their whole lives, 10, 15 years, to get a career, you know? And could you imagine doing that long, and then you get one song? But they say that's all it takes is one song, you know?
To bank, I guess.
Right.
Sure.
If you have somebody, the right person handling your finances,
Sure.
and you get the money right. We just saw a band the other day called Better Than Ezra.
Oh, yeah, I remember them.
Oh, yeah?
From the 90s.
From the 90s.
Yeah.
And they were at the Garlic Fest, and it was other cover bands. Like there was the Red Knot Chili Peppers, which was pretty cool. And then they were the headliner. And my friend's like, well, Better Than Ezra, that's not a cover band. That's a legit band
is,
from the
yeah.
90s.
It was.
And in their set, they said, once upon a time in 1997 for 6 weeks on the charts, and it was like one song.
Yeah.
And they were able to then make a whole career of playing shows
Just that.
for 20 years, you know, and they do a bunch of covers and original songs, but you could tell the guy's vocal, no offense if you're watching right now, he definitely peaked in the 90s. The band was really good, but the vocal was like, I don't know, maybe he lost it.
Nickelback comes to mind.
Yeah. Well, you know, surprisingly, Nickelback has had a
Resurgence, I've heard.
Absolutely. Man, I feel bad for those guys, dude. It's like what I think they call it cock rock, excuse my language. It's like I kind of like it, man. You know, it's not. Oh, you know what? I have this going. Let me mute this.
Sure.
There we go. Yeah, I don't have anything. Oh, it's still going. Check. There we go. I'll figure this out one day. Is it literally still coming out of there? Please hold. My apologies, man. This is what I get for not having like a producer and trying to produce the show while I
problem.
host it.
No problem.
Yeah, please. You can definitely listen to us. You know what's crazy? Check. This is my legalized free speech shirt. It's got Biden with a Hitler mustache. Please don't judge me. I saw it at the Garlic Fest. I thought it was hilarious. It might be a little bit there. I fixed it. Okay, sorry about that, Jose. It might be like a little bit much, but you know, I have Jewish heritage, so any reference to Hitler is like a little over the top. But what I really enjoy about it is the legalized free speech. It seems like we're on free speech is under full-blown assault right now.
You think?
Yeah, do you agree? You can disagree with me. This is the kind of podcast where you're allowed to disagree with me.
Free speech is
I'm going to have you
under
get right up in the mic for me if you don't mind, brother.
free speech is completely under attack right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the battle, the best return against bad speech is better speech. So rather than silencing somebody, it's better to hear their opinion and talk it out, right? I think the ALCU, if that's the right, the Jewish
ACLU.
ACLU. So one of their big things
American
is that
Civil Liberties Union.
correct, and they didn't want to silence the Nazis because they understood that that's a very slippery slope.
Can't pick and choose who you're going to silence.
That's right, because you'll be the next one to be silenced.
That's right.
And it's like it's part of this whole cancel culture, and it's just like a wild time to be, involved in watching what's happening. And I think that kind of ties in slightly to the medical field, but we kind of got ahead of ourselves. What I usually like to do is start these podcasts with who are you and what do you do?
Okay. So let's see, where do I start? First of all, I'm a Florida boy.
Okay, born and raised?
Almost born and raised. Born in Havana, Cuba.
Okay.
Immigrated to the United States in 1970.
Wow.
And then grew up in Hialeah, Florida. Little town down there in Miami.
Yeah.
Kind of ghetto.
Yeah.
But gives me character, as they say.
That's right.
Street smart and book smart eventually.
How old were you when you immigrated to the United States?
I was 2 years old.
Okay.
But I grew up in a part of Miami that was all immigrants, so I didn't really leave my country, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
Right.
There wasn't like a necessity to assimilate because in your neighborhood, it was like Little Havana.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. All the signs are in Spanish. Any store you walk into, they're only speaking to you in Spanish. And there were people there that never needed to learn English. Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of resentment when you don't assimilate into the country that welcomes you.
Yeah, I can understand that.
You should be able to assimilate, and make an effort to do so and learn the history of the country that welcomes you. So eventually, I joined the Army after leaving Hialeah, Florida. I got out of there as soon as I could.
Yeah, understood.
I did want to assimilate. I was one of those, and I wasn't going to assimilate there. Limited growth in a inner city ghetto, kind of situation. People that tend to stay there didn't do much with their lives. If you wanted to do anything significant with your life, you needed to get out of there, go to college, do whatever. So I joined the Army, and that's where I ended up in the medical field. That's why it's relevant, and I want to throw that in because
Understood.
It was the first taste of the medical community that I thought I'd make a career out of it. I was a paramedic, an EMT. I was with the infantry, 101st Airborne, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Maybe some people recognize that.
Yeah.
I wasn't all gung-ho. The only reason why I went in was because
You went in to get a way out.
that and money for college.
Yep.
Right? Growing up without a dad and immigrant and all that stuff, there was no money for college except if you found it yourself. So I got out of the military after serving the years that I signed up for, and then I knew that I wanted to stay in the medical field. So pre-med was the next step. So pre-med is you get a science degree of some sort, and you apply to medical school. So I finished my degree in cell biology, and applied to University of Houston Medical School and got accepted and started medical school there. But about 2 years in, I quit. And I came back to Florida. It wasn't vibing in medical school for me.
Yeah.
It was a time where the Clintons were in power.
So this is the 90s.
This is the 95 to be exact.
Yeah, okay.
95, and Hillary Clinton wanted to reform healthcare, if you remember that whole thing. The HMOs, managed healthcare system started to come in. Doctors were being told how to practice medicine. There's something about the craft of practicing medicine, the being able to practice medicine as you see fit, because they give you a license to do that.
Right.
We might get into it, but there's certain liberties that doctors can take by virtue of having a medical license that, you wouldn't think that is allowable, but they're able to do that.
That's this whole thing, like talk to your doctor about.
Exactly.
Like, you're supposed to have this relationship with your doctor,
Exactly.
where based on their experience and their knowledge and what a detailed or personalized approach to your health.
Exactly.
But you're saying that it was steering away from that to a more like, this is the way to do medicine.
Follow the checkboxes.
Yeah.
So ask these questions to your patients. If they answer yes or no, it's an algorithm.
Oh yeah.
You answer yes or no, and it'll take you down a certain path. So that, a monkey could do that.
Yep. Was this around the same time they added pain as the fifth vital sign? Do you remember this, where this whole pain is now the fifth vital sign, and you come in and they say, what's your pain level on a scale of 1 to 10? And it's so subjective, and everybody would say, my pain's 11. Is this around the same time?
Yeah, but that was all orchestrated not by the federal government, but by Purdue Pharma.
Purdue.
Right.
Yeah.
And the evil family.
It's
ran
unreal
that place,
that the way this is, I think they had this huge fines they've just paid out,
Yeah.
but it's minuscule. It's raindrops to a river compared to the money that they've made and the lives they've destroyed.
Yeah, it's a real shame. Dope Sick is a really good documentary on Netflix.
Okay.
It's kind of it's a movie turned miniseries turned documentary that tells the whole story of Purdue Pharma, and
I think I just started watching it.
yeah, it's really good watch. I would recommend it tremendously. And it was a private company. It wasn't, it wasn't listed on the NASDAQ or anything like that. So that family made millions and billions of dollars, really. But what's interesting is that the board and the management of that company, there were people that would come in and out of that management that were associated with the FDA, right? So they would work for the FDA, and the same thing happens in the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve. People that work for,
Big banks.
Shearson Lehman, Chase.
Yeah.
The big banks, they walk in and out of the federal government to do regulation, and then they go into the banks that they work for, and they have an influence as a result of having worked for the federal government. They have an influence in being able to steer policy in one way or another that would favor,
their company and them personally.
Exactly. So, Nancy Pelosi not too long ago was asked about whether or not Congress should be able to, at liberty, make the kind of decisions that they make in their investments.
Yeah.
Knowing that Congress always has sort of an insider, they have insider knowledge, to use the word of the Securities Exchange Commission. When you're doing insider trading, it's really you have information regarding those stocks or the forces that push that industry one way or another. And if Congress makes laws to go, in one way of regulation or another way of regulation, companies could if they knew about that, they could anticipate that and make moves or sell stock or,
That if somebody like you and I did this,
right,
we would go to prison.
Like Martha Stewart,
right,
spending time in federal penitentiary. So it's kind of interesting. In every aspect, I see Congress being very hypocritical to mandates, to, investment policies for Congress.
The video of her answering that question is so telling.
Right.
She gets asked the question, should Congress or should spouses of Congress be allowed to make financial decisions based on the policies or whatever? And she grabs her water. She takes this huge gulp of water, like she knows she's on the chopping block, and then just straight face says, absolutely, they should.
Oh, yeah.
And they're probably worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and they do public service. It's wild that it's a do as I say, not as I do
Sure.
situation. And, it seems like our country is built on that.
There's a guy actually on YouTube that follows her investments, her and her husband's investments, and her son's investments too, and puts money exactly where they're putting it. And he's gotten like 25% returns on his money.
Oh, interesting.
So it's kind of, at least Congress, at least they have to make it public as to what their major financial moves are.
Right.
So if they invest, $50,000, they got to report it. And this guy just follows exactly what she's doing,
And he's
racking it in.
interesting. So at least if you're privy to that, you can, potentially make some money as well.
Yes.
How much of that, I guess that wouldn't be considered insider trading because you don't have the knowledge. You're just following somebody else's
Yeah, that's not
roadmap.
Inside. It would be insider if Congress is hiding behind the wall of, this is not insider trading, this is my own private affairs, financial affairs, then yeah, you could follow them and there's no repercussion. But at some point, if they consider, if they consider the knowledge of what Congress has as a conflict of interests for certain types of stock, then yeah, that would eventually be considered trading. But it's like asking the cops to police themselves.
Right.
Congress, if they're asked, hey, can you implement term limits? Can you implement, these types of rules? No, these are the things that keep them in power. These are the things that line their pockets as politicians.
And why would they ever make a decision that's going to hurt their bottom line?
Everybody's benefiting. Everybody's benefiting in Congress from those laws, from those policies.
How do we fix this? Is there a fix? Is it do we start on the local level? Do you vote in people who you think have better morals? Do you get younger people in there? If they don't have term limits, you have to wait for them to die?
Well, if you think of the longest standing Congress people, Nancy Pelosi being one of them, Strom Thurmond when he was Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
The typical names that you hear, right? Even if you don't watch the news very much, you're bound to recognize these names. And they're just in it for the long haul. And are they really, when you think about these politicians that have been in office for 40 years, and they've been talking about the same sort of fixes that they want to see for the country, why haven't we seen any of this stuff in 40 years that they've been in power? They've been using the same story over and over again. How long does it take for you to implement your ideas that you sold, all your campaigns on going back 40 years?
It's almost like they know that the general public have such a short memory.
Yeah.
It's almost like because it's like whatever's the leading news cycle, that's what we know is what's happening.
Yeah.
And you forget what they said 4 years ago or 8 years ago. But there's people who have been alive and seen it all for the last 40 years who are just probably like yourself, just pulling your hair out. Like, when does this change? How does it change? Yeah. It's obviously creating a big rift in this country. And now they're trying to control the narrative through the news and the media, right?
Yeah. If you think about the way democracy was implemented with our forefathers of writing the Constitution, and when the Federalist Papers were being published, they were being passed around, so that people, while the Constitution was being written, there were people that were reading the essays that contributed to the ideas of what the Constitution is made up today. Those are called the Federalist Papers. I would recommend reading those.
Okay.
In those papers, they were published in newspapers, in the regular newspapers, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, and people would read it. There was an intellectual curiosity that existed. And when shit didn't, go the way that people planned, they showed up at the governor's house with pitchforks and torches.
Yeah.
People were involved in democracy. there needed to be a level of intellectualism to understand the things that were affecting the country that was being built at the time. I think that's missing in modern democracy.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
And intellectual curiosity is something that's not rewarded anymore. I'm gonna tell you, this is the absolute truth. So TikTok, as you know, super popular with the kids, right?
Yeah.
So if you open up TikTok in China, you know what they use TikTok in China for?
Well, my understanding is, and I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but TikTok in China, if kids are on TikTok, every 2 or 3 videos they see are about like science and engineering and math, and they're educating their kids. Also, it'll say, you know, get outside and go do something. I think they also have blackout hours.
Right.
You know, which seems smart, right? But do we want to become China? Do we want the government telling us, you know, what is on our social media and what isn't? You know, it's a weird
Right,
kind
but
of.
do you want to reward people for doing stupid videos about which celebrity do I look like?
Yeah, dude, it's unbelievable.
I mean, is that providing any value to the individual?
Not to the individual, but
to society.
definitely to the higher ups. It's like been this 50-year thing of dumbing down society.
Yes.
Getting us to be distracted with celebrity.
Yes.
And it's working to their advantage, because like you're saying, this intellectual, you know, being an intellectual is not rewarded. You know, you're not going to go viral like that.
Right.
But if you say
But
that
maybe
you would,
because
hope,
now we see the Joe Rogans of the world, we see Jordan Peterson, right? We see these people that are coming up the ranks and filling up stadiums.
yeah.
There is definitely a curiosity.
You can be on camera. It's okay.
There's a certainly, I think, a rebirth of people wanting to understand a little bit more than we're being fed.
Yeah.
We've been fed 3 networks, right? 3 or 4 networks, maybe 5. Now these formats, right? Independent journalism, YouTubers, people with individual ideas that aren't filtered through a corporate, you know, system.
Yep.
It's changing the playing field, right? CNN has lost millions of viewers. Joe Rogan is blowing. I mean, he has 11 million viewers.
Yeah, hundreds of millions of downloads a month.
I mean,
it's unbelievable.
right.
Well, people want to hear an unfettered conversation, and they want to hear balanced information.
Right.
But you see, he's under full-blown attack.
Sure is.
They're trying to cancel him every way possible. Obviously, he's made some bad decisions with some language use, which, you know, none of us condone that type of language use. Luckily, his following is so strong, and he's so honest and willing to admit where he's wrong. You're good, dude. That it seems like it didn't go far. He's not. I think he's uncancelable. Thank God, because
him and Chappelle.
Yeah, you
right?
know,
Dave Chappelle is, you know,
the GOAT.
And these people are saying it like it is, and they're not getting canceled because people are hungry finally for the truth.
Yeah,
you know, maybe. I hope so.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
And, you know, thank God for the bravery of these people, because you're putting your neck on the line. And what we've seen for the past, 10 years or maybe less with cancel culture is you put your opinion out there, and it could ruin you, you know?
Yep.
And if this is a way that you feed your family, whether it's through comedy or sharing information, if you get canceled, you know, what do you do from there? But it seems like people are starting to wake up. They want to hear legitimate information. Yeah. And, you know, thank God for that. You know, I used to be a CNN guy. You know, I was raised by a liberal mom, and I'm huge in, like, equal rights. And, like, there's a meme that says, like, I want to be able to protect my pot plants and my gay friends with my AR-15s, like
right.
something like that. That's kind of like where I stand.
Right.
But I thought when I was watching CNN that I was getting like a middle ground. I was convinced of it until
you might have been.
I think it's changed. It's slowly
15 years ago.
Right. And now it's clearly entertainment.
Yeah.
You know, and everything is op-ed. Is that like an opinion editorial?
Yeah.
It seems like everything is that now. It's
Yes.
like all opinion /
Right.
entertainment. And my understanding is that started with the 24-hour news cycle. I went to broadcasting school, and what you learn about air is that you have to fill it.
Yep.
You know, so when you
Dead air is the last thing you want.
exactly, so they're constantly looking for something to fill the air with.
Sure.
Also, there's a phrase in broadcasting: if it bleeds, it leads.
Sure.
Right. So they want like you to feel like the world's ending,
Right.
and there's also this thing about, well, if we create chaos, then we can then save you from the
Right.
chaos.
Right.
You know, so for me, honestly, thank God for Joe Rogan, because the beginning of the pandemic, I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist, a bit. And when all of this, and they said we had to stay in our houses, I immediately go to, oh, they're going to force us to get vaccinated for this. This is what all the preppers have been prepping for, you know? And I started going down these weird 5G, you know, rabbit holes and whatnot. But then I was lucky enough to stumble upon Rogan, and Rogan, for me, gave me a more balanced look and an objective look at what was happening. And I was able to get some information that wasn't fear tactics.
Right.
Because I was initially watching CNN.
Right.
And it was like death tickers every day, you know. And then you watch Rogan, and he's got, you know, evolutionary biologists on. And
Eric and Brett Weinstein.
yeah, I mean, these are brave people, you know. I can't remember, is Eric?
Sam Harris.
I don't know if
another
I
one.
know Sam Harris. I've probably seen it.
Must see.
Yeah?
Yeah. Eric and Brett Weinstein, evolutionary biologist, Evergreen University.
Yes.
The great stories, the Dark Horse. I mean, great stories behind those guys.
So the Evergreen situation, there were people who saw the writing on the wall years ago when in academia there was these narratives that were starting to be pushed, that people saw like kind of the writing on the wall of what was going to be coming.
Yep.
You know, I saw something interesting about a KGB defector who did an interview in the 80s and talked about Russia's long game. You know what I'm talking about, where they talk about that Russia and China, they're long game people, right? They got 50-year plans.
Yep.
And they talked about infiltrating the educational system and changing the minds of 3 generations. And if you can't see that that's happened in our education system, I mean, you got to kind of really wake up. I have one friend specifically. Unfortunately, we're not friends anymore. He, you know, unfriended me and blocked me because I thought that his death ticker on Facebook every day was a little bit crazy. But he was always more of an objective guy. And then he went to college later in his life. And I could see a shift in his ideologies. And I never really put the two together until I started learning about what was happening in academia.
That's
and then to me, it made sense. Oh, this is indoctrination. This is what's happening in these colleges across the country.
Yep. There are, I think at the University of Arizona, there's students going around protesting that there's no longer mask mandates. They want the mask mandates back. The students. It's the most...
It's
ludicrous.
brainwash.
I mean, I just can't imagine that.
Well, the thing is that the science has proven that most of the masks that we're wearing do not prevent the spread of COVID that's going around. You know, unless you're wearing that N95 tight to your face, it's got a good fit. But I was in the grocery store a couple weeks ago, and this very pretty young woman, we almost run into each other, right? And I said, "Oh, excuse me." She walks past me and says, "Put a mask on," right? She's got a Lily Pulitzer piece of fabric over her face. Okay?
Typical Palm Beach.
Dude, and I turned around, I said, "Your mask doesn't do anything." She was appalled. "Yes, it does." Right? So then I go to the register. She's at the talking to the manager and the police officer on duty, pointing at me. I don't know what she was saying.
It's your tattoos,
but
man.
I'm thinking to myself, when these scientists are in a lab in China coming up with a fucking virus that to kill people, whatever it was, you think they thought that maybe your Lily Pulitzer mask might not stop it? It's unbelievable. So we know at this point fabric masks don't do anything, yet people still wear 2 of them.
Right.
And how much of that is like signaling, like I'm willing to listen to the rules and follow the rules.
Sure.
You know, and it's a polite thing. Like,
Which is completely anti-American, by the way, if you think about it.
well said.
We're a country of rebels, man.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you come to this country to beat your own drum.
Which was that was like what it was founded on. We're out of here. We don't want the rules of the royals, right? And excuse my lack of understanding of world history, but I know we came here to get out of the thumb of the British.
Yes.
But listen, the reason why
we didn't like our tea taxed,
right?
So we threw it all in Boston Harbor.
Fucking brilliant, right? But now they like tax you to tax you to tax you. But it's un-American because we're shifting to a world. What's the word I'm looking up? A politics that are world politics.
Yeah.
And that started. I'm not
New
sure.
World Order stuff.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Like and all the time I see news articles of how China's getting it right. You know, and it's like we're shifting towards this very China-centric lifestyle, which, I mean, in 2 years, we became a mask-wearing society. I mean, I couldn't imagine it 2 years ago, but now it's like, you know, masks are everywhere.
On paper, we kind of look like China.
Yeah.
On paper.
And this is just the beginning, unfortunately, I think.
Yeah. Unfortunately, all that started with the Bushes, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. You know, a lot of people hinge on, you know, I'm a conservative, I'm for business, and when you start to press them on Bush policy and Cheney, if you've ever seen that movie Vice, with what's his name,
Christian Bale. The makeup that they did on him.
That guy,
Christian Bale's brilliant.
Is one of the best actors in Hollywood.
Brilliant, but he looks just like Dick Cheney in that movie. Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's alarming almost.
And I mean, that guy was evil incarnate, man.
Ruthless.
And that's when our businesses with China started. If you notice, that's when Walmart, you know, exploded because they peddle Chinese shit.
Right.
You know, you want to be a good American, you want to practice democracy the American way. Next time you go buy something, don't let it come from China. And that's the way to close that off.
It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
At this point, it is so difficult. Before we started here, I worked for this company, this hydroxyl generator you see behind you here. It turns the moisture in the air into vaporized hydrogen peroxide. It's an industrial grade air and surface sanitizing piece of equipment that was developed as a safe alternative to ozone. Okay, we started working on getting it listed for federal contracts, and we got this company who sells to VA hospitals and whatnot. They started asking us where our parts come from, and it's full of Chinese parts. And their thing, well, I called it ABC. They need to come from anywhere but China. Right. And the owner of the company said, well, I can't get fans. You can't get the electronics. Right. You know, there are some places that you can get it from, but because of the way that we are like a world economy now, global economy. Thank you very much. It's almost impossible. Yeah. You know, and the ease of ordering from Amazon.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, there's been forces in place that have, I mean, the world has become the whore of China.
Yeah.
If I could say it that way.
Yeah.
And they know it. So one wishful thinking idea that there was because of the pandemic, knowing that there's a lot of evidence that the virus came from Wuhan, that this is a ploy by the rest of the world being led by the United States as they call it a white flag, not white flag.
False flag?
False flag.
Yeah.
So the false flag is that the United States somehow orchestrated with NIH money. Remember, Dr. Fauci being questioned by Rand Paul in Congress.
Yeah.
All this NIH money, you're not funding gain of function, et cetera, et cetera. We knew exactly what they were doing. And we were going to let them completely drop the ball so that the entire world could turn against China. Once all this gets investigated, there is a theory that the world's economies are going to get together, and because we've been sucking off the nipple of China for all this time, that we're just going to cancel all the debts that we have with China and drown China completely.
Interesting.
And force everything back to, I mean, U.S. manufacturing within a year can come back to the levels where, you know, where Ohio was making, you know, cars and Detroit was pumping out, you know, vehicles all day long. Those days are over, but doesn't mean that they can't come back.
So you think they can come back?
For our survival, they must come
They
back.
have to come back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the U.S. is an innovator, right? We come up with the ideas. But innovation belongs to a very select few number of people. The innovators are Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, you know, these guys that are idea people. The Apple guy.
Yeah. Steve Jobs.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, the U.S. is full of them. But that doesn't create capital.
We outsource the production.
Right. You know, you still have 27 million people in the United States, however many people, I forgot the last count. You know, most of that was manufacturing, and U.S. manufacturing in some industries is still favored because, for example, the world that I work in medical devices, it is anything but China.
Right.
If you're going to have an implant, if you're going to a hip implant, you want a defibrillator in your heart, a stent, or coronary, a neurological stent to prevent stroke. You think you want that shit made in China?
No.
Hell no.
No.
And everybody that practices medicine around the world knows that. So we still have a foothold in certain things. If you go to Minnesota, for whatever reason, the Midwest has always been, Chicago and Minneapolis have been homes of the biggest 500 Fortune 100 Fortune companies. General Mills, 3M, which incidentally stands for Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, 3M.
Oh, interesting.
All those companies are there in the Midwest. And in Minneapolis is where Medtronic, a big medical device company, developed the first defibrillators, pacemakers. And there's a whole ecosystem of medical device companies that exist there. Yeah, they make little things here and there in Costa Rica, China. But those companies are designing and manufacturing in the United States because they know that the medical community still counts on devices at high quality for the United States. So that's something that we dominate still. After a product is in the market for 10, 15, 20 years, you'll see it start being manufactured in India or China once the patent's expired or once they start copying them, you know. But you can't copy really fancy, high-tech, cutting-edge, pushing the envelope kind of technology right off the bat. So we'll always dominate with that.
Well, thank God.
The pharma business has been outsourced. China and India are the two largest pharmaceutical manufacturers. And you could develop a small molecule in a lab, but once you have it developed, it's really easy to make a pill. But when you're making hip implants or fancy x-ray machines, MRIs, CAT scans, those machines are made in Switzerland, Germany, United States. There's still a desire to have certain types of products made in countries like the United States.
Which is just so important, but I think we all lose sight of that. And everybody was so anti-Trump, and I understand his crass nature and his, he wasn't a very, I don't know if likable is the word, but he was definitely pushing for America first. It seemed to me, and again, I wasn't getting my information straight from the sources. Who knows if I have the right information? But it seemed like he was trying to bring manufacturing back to America, and instead of focusing on that he was doing, we were focusing on this ruse
thing,
and that Russia colluded with Russia,
which you've heard all the new news that's now.
It was a total
scam.
Yeah,
it started with the Steele dossier that was paid for by Hillary Clinton, and then pushed through the Justice Department, and tech companies were involved in creating and digging up stuff that was happening during his campaign and also into the presidency. Spying on a president is treason. Used to be you hung for that stuff.
Right.
It's being investigated right now, and it's an active investigation. We're going to see what the outcome of that is, but it's going to be interesting. I like what you said about, the reason why Biden got elected is because it was Orange Man bad. That's it.
Yeah.
That was all. But if you would have listened to the message, right, of course you're going to be an asshole when you're dealing with Mexico and Russia and China.
Yep.
You have to be a narcissist.
Yep.
Do you think nice CEOs are successful?
No, absolutely. It's ruthless. You have to be cutthroat and ruthless.
Those people are the biggest. I want the biggest asshole running my company.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. If I'm a capitalist, that's what I want. Yeah, can I be a little bit social responsible? Of course. But tell that to Nike that's SJWing all over the place.
SJW?
Social justice warriors.
Oh, yeah.
And they got Chinese kids doing their bidding. I mean, the Olympics has been a complete sham. The lowest viewership in all of history. Nobody watched the Olympics. Did you watch the Olympics?
No, I watched some of the Winter Olympics, the snowboarding. Did you see that the snowboarding, like the big jump, was in like a nuclear power plant?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I don't know,
That's
just
the joke.
visually, it's like, is this real life? That's the type of shit where
Yeah.
I go to like, oh, we do live in a simulation,
Yeah. It's a joke. And if you're still watching that stuff and not realizing what's really going on, I feel sorry for you.
Yeah.
I really do. You there's a lot of people living in this bubble, this little echo chamber. And if you're not being critical to what you're thinking, being critical to others, not criticizing, but listening to the message and debating. Use logic, use reason. Don't kill the messenger before you've heard the message.
Well said.
The message, is more important than the messenger. The message from Orange Man Bad was more important than Orange Man Bad.
Yeah, absolutely. America first.
I mean, he reversed NAFTA. I mean, am I a Trump fan? I'm not. The guy's
Right.
an asshole.
Yep.
And there's probably better Republicans. There's probably better people in the Republican Party that could do a more refined job. And they're starting to come up the ranks now. But what's left in the Democratic Party, man? I mean, they're reaching for Hillary Clinton
Again.
to lead the. Are you kidding
And
me?
this is proof of how quickly people forget.
Yeah.
Or that they thought that everything that was said about Hillary was, Trump lying about her. But, the Clinton empire is kind of scary, dude. It's kind of scary. Like
53 suicides.
Yeah, tied to them.
To them.
And if you say
How does
that,
that
people will
happen?
say this is a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
But there are tons of
It's all
documents.
evidence. It's
There's evidence behind it.
everywhere for that. Starting with Vince Foster and leading up from there. And there's problems in the world. There's child trafficking. And we're not opening up the little black book that Ghislaine Maxwell had with Epstein.
That whole Epstein thing
That
is
shit
like
is crazy.
It's unbelievable.
It's crazy.
The Alex Jones was saying it 10 years ago. There's an island where this is happening, and people are like, "Oh, he's fucking out of his mind," And sure enough, this is happening,
Yeah.
and literally, what's going to come of that? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah, and one of the pimps that was very good friends with Ghislaine and Epstein, that was in a French prison 4 days ago.
I just heard this. Committed suicide. Just
Committed, and
had enough.
and guess what? The cameras were off.
Yeah.
Same shit.
Same thing happened with Epstein.
I mean, people are not going to be critical of that and ask questions. Why isn't this all over the news? Why? I mean, this is perfect evidence that there is unforeseen powers that run the news media.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you look at the ownership of who owns what, it's really just 3 companies.
Yep.
And if you look at the leadership and the management of those 3 companies, we know exactly what side of the aisle they stand on because they contribute to the campaigns of very liberal. I mean, we hear about George Soros too being in the background and doing his little, master of puppet, kind of manipulation of stuff. I don't know how true that is, but
That's the problem with when you start to lose trust in information in general. You can't make sense of what's real and what isn't. Like when I hear George Soros, I think of like the pallets of bricks that were at all of these Black Lives Matter protests.
Right.
These bricks that just showed up in the middle of
Mysteriously
the street. Who's that funded by?
Yeah.
And these agent provocateurs that want to paint out a legitimate cause, right, about just treating of black people in our country.
Yep.
But they want to paint it out to be chaos and take advantage of that and turn it into anarchy. And it's like, there's been so much attention brought to that January 6th debacle, which was just, horrendous. But there was a lot of things that were instrumentated there, I feel. But nobody talks about that, our cities were lit on fire all summer 2020. And all of that, I think, was led by people who want to, create anarchy in our country. And, but what's the end game? Is it to paint out democracy that it doesn't work so that we can go to this global cabal that's, running the world? And how much of that has to do with there not being term limits and that the CIA and the FBI, like these are these shadow governments that fucking pull the strings, It's hard for,
if it doesn't matter, again, what side of the aisle, that's a facade. It's just something that, it's like gladiator games. You need to give the masses entertainment.
Yep.
And something to root for. But it doesn't matter what side you're still going to lose if you're not the elite. The elite are managing. Again, conspiracy theories abound everywhere.
Right.
But there is one thing for sure. There were rich, powerful families at one point in this country. And that money still exists, and that power still exists. It's not out in the open. Whether they're doing child sacrifices and drinking adrenochrome and shit like that.
Yeah.
I think that's crazy talk. I mean, I don't know that's the QAnon dialogue that seems a little bit out of whack.
It's a little bit hard to wrap your head around. Initially, I saw this documentary early at the beginning of the pandemic called Out of Shadows, and it's a stuntman from California who stumbles upon this whole satanic thing that's happening in Hollywood, and then this documentary takes you down this rabbit hole of Pizzagate and whatnot. And I immediately, I'm like, I fucking knew it. But then I start to objectively think about it, and again, you don't know if this isn't like misinformation or disinformation to muddy the water and to paint out anybody who's critical of the elite as lunatics who believe in child sacrifice. But I also know that human nature is brutal.
Occasionally, every month you hear of a news blurb that's in the third page of the newspaper. They find 136 kids in some warehouse.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere.
Right. And that's real. That's like...
That's real, man. How the hell... Where were those kids taken from? Latin America, the border, it's, things are happening there. Fentanyl's coming in by the boatloads. But in Miami, being sort of a trashy kind of touristy place where you go to party and people pay big money for entertainment, there's a huge human trafficking hub right in Miami, 90 miles south of us.
I can't help but think about when you're on the coast like this and you have these ports and these very, very wealthy people who get whatever they want, that it's very easy for a young woman to just be put on a fucking boat, man, and just never heard of again.
Yep.
And anytime I see these like rich elite people who build restaurants on the inlet, with like a private club upstairs. What the fuck's going on there?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, you're not part of the club, so don't ask.
Well, I don't want to be a part of that club, you know? I think that I do feel lucky that we are in America, though, because we do have an opportunity if, like, you don't get lost in the sauce, so to speak, and you focus on your goals. And what I like to say in our family is do the next right thing. We also like to live by the 3-foot rule. If it's not happening in the 3-foot circle around us, we try to not give it too much fuel. And you know, my wife and I were able to build a business in the middle of a pandemic, and we feel so blessed
Awesome,
for
man.
that, you know. So there is still opportunity in this country. It's definitely not a well balanced opportunity, right? Some people start off completely different, and excuse my language, because you fell out of the vagina, you know, that's like a total roll of the dice here, you know. And you know, thank God that I didn't, you know, I wasn't born in Baltimore,
Right.
you know, black kid in Baltimore who
Right.
has a zero opportunity. And that goes back to the you know, how long these people have been in power and have done nothing for these neighborhoods that are just like you know,
Right.
deadly,
Right.
deadly. There's no way out. Yet we want to go instill democracy in other places around the world and get
Yeah.
people to back that. But it's never about democracy.
That's just a story.
Yeah.
That's just a storyline. It's a facade. It's not. We're not interested in exporting democracy. There's always some ulterior motive or motivation that
like
we're-
control of resources.
Yeah. Or you know, giving power. You know, like if I think eventually one day the Biden connection to Ukraine is going to come out. So people have a short memory, like you said.
Yeah.
But early in the Biden administration, there was some rumblings about Ukraine and that he was calling out some judge in Ukraine because they were trying to press his son Hunter on some dealings with Burisma, which is an oil company in Russia. If you're going to talk about Russian collusion, let's wait about a year when all this stuff, you know, if here's a situation, midterm elections are going to happen in November,
Yeah.
right? Like it or not, there's going to be a tsunami of Republicans in Congress, and then there's going to be a Republican Speaker of the House, and you're going to have elected Republicans in Congress, and you're going to have a one-sided government. So the last 18 months has been the best advertising for the GOP because it's a disaster with the Democrats.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So it's pretty obvious where things are going to go politically in the next 8 months. Once that happens and they clean house in a way, the investigations that are going to come and expose the Democrat Party for what they've been doing for the last 4 years is going to be the worst show on earth. I mean, it really is going to be, it's really going to expose the worst corruption. And it's going to be that reset, the great reset that they talk about.
Yeah.
There's going to be a great reset with the political system in the United States. I don't know what's going to happen to the left, the radical left. I think they're still sort of fringe. They're not. There's a lot of moderate Republicans that are family oriented. They live in Virginia. You know, they've been coal miners their whole life. Biden talks about them all the time, but they don't associate themselves with the Biden administration at all.
Right.
Like that guy that just got elected in Virginia, the governor. You know, that's
Is that Manchin?
No. No. Joe Manchin is the one that he's a Democrat that has been voting against all the Democratic policies. This bill that they tried to pass, he voted against.
The Build
it.
Back Better.
Right. He was him and another Democrat, I forgot her name, decided not to vote on their political side. And, you know, they're the heroes for the Republicans, obviously. But anyway, we're going to see a major shift change. And we've seen it. We've seen the pendulum swing, you know, in the past, in history, from Jimmy Carter to Reagan, and then back again with the Clintons, and then the Bushes. You know, it just goes back and forth. So we're going to see a big GOP dominance here in the next at least 2 years, unless they completely drop the ball. In those 2 years, the amount of investigations they're going to expose the swamp of Democrats, and of course there's Republicans that are just as shitty, is going to be really eye-opening.
You know, you hope, but the problem is the cognitive dissonance, if that's the right word, of the public, that when they hear this stuff, if it doesn't match the narrative that they believe and they hold so strongly to them, they'll just think it's lies. It's Republican lies,
Right.
you know, and it won't cause an uproar. It will probably just create more division.
Right.
And there's some people who feel like we're inevitably headed towards a civil war.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to get that bad. I think our real problem here is that pendulum you're talking about between back and forth from left to right. It's the two-party system, the two wings on the same bird, so to speak, that, it's all like establishment elitist that leaves us, it's never about the American people.
Yeah.
And it was actually, if we go back to the Weinsteins, Eric, I think, started this thing called Unity 2020.
Right.
And on Twitter, it was a hashtag, and it started trending. And it was about creating a third party in the middle.
Right.
Banned off Twitter, banned off Facebook, because their reasoning was it would give too much opportunity for Trump to win, because it would distract from the Democrats potentially winning.
That's right.
But, like Tulsi Gabbard, right?
Right.
She would have been an excellent candidate. She's a woman. She's a congresswoman. She's a vet. She's in the center. They totally railroaded her, Hillary said that she was a Russian spy. What?
Yeah. Yeah. Can't be more American patriot than she is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to talk to you about is you mentioned when we decided to do the podcast about you handling FDA law.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, did I remember hearing that correctly? What is, like, if you don't mind me digging into what do you do with the FDA? How does that work?
So in the process of getting either a drug or a device in the U.S. market, it has to go through an FDA process. You fill out an application, you provide all the technical documentation, and you convince the FDA that your product is safe and effective, right? And whatever the product may be, it could be a drug, could be a new implant of some sort.
Our hydroxyl generator here that turns.
If you're using it in a healthcare setting,
Yep.
sure, you'd have to pass certain types of testing to make sure that whatever people are breathing as a result of that machine producing whatever it's producing is safe, whatever. So in the process of getting a product approved, you pay the FDA hundreds of thousands of dollars so that they can look at your application. So some people already feel that that's a conflict of interest.
It's like a bribe.
You're paying them, right? But sometimes things do get rejected from the FDA. I feel, having worked with them for 25 years, I feel that there is an intent to be objective with scientific data, right? I mean, they are a data-driven organization.
Right.
And it's chocked full of scientists and doctors. And all those people are just like you and me. They put on their pants one leg at a time. They want to do a good thing in their life. But once you get to management and the politics, there's ways to influence the FDA to go one way or another. Either that, or it's either money or the opportunity to make money. So every time, for the last 25 years that I've worked with them, the guy in charge, or the person in charge of the FDA is known as the Fda Commissioner.
Okay.
And the Fda Commissioner is usually a person who has an MD or a PhD and is a scientist of some sort. But throughout their career, they might have worked for a big pharma company, or they might have worked for a big medical device company. And then they go into the FDA and they start doing policy management. And because they're human and they have friends and they're corruptible, and they could, nobody's, we like to think that people are idealists, right? And we will always do the right thing when nobody's watching. man, that's more rare than it is true.
Yeah.
Because, and China's proof of that. They could buy anybody at this point, and money just corrupts
Yeah.
incredibly. So at the end of the day, the company's trying to get a product marketed so they could make bank.
Yep.
And the FDA was paid money to oversee that review of that product. Once it gets into the market, then it stands on its own merits. Either the product is effective and it's not killing anybody, and the doctors like it because it's helping their patients, and that product will survive, or it was a big sham and investors got bilked, the FDA got fooled, and none of the products worked. So there was a big push during this emergency use authorization. Maybe you guys have heard it.
Yep.
Where the vaccines were hurriedly developed. Typically a vaccine takes 5 years to develop, and you do all kinds of testing on all kinds of different populations. You've read that the FDA had sealed all the safety data that Moderna and Pfizer had submitted to the FDA, and you could do a freedom of information request, which means that you could ask the federal government for them to provide you documentation for things that should be public, like clinical data for a vaccine that should be public, right?
Yep.
Well, for whatever reason, Pfizer had requested the FDA for them not to release that information for 56 years. Now, there's no logic behind that. Why would you ask the FDA, and they agreed, but now a judge in Maryland reversed that decision. So we're going to see very soon, and the data has been trickling out. And some of the first analysis of this data has showed that there was evidence of cardiomyopathy.
Yep.
There was evidence of blood clotting. There was evidence of women becoming infertile as a result of the vaccine. There's evidence now that one of the components of the vaccine that attaches to the spike protein is derived from the HIV virus that was developed by Fauci, 35 years ago. Now there's conspiracy theories floating around that people that have got the vaccine are going to develop some form of mild HIV in the future.
Yeah.
This is crazy stuff. I don't know whether to believe that or not. But when you show a scientist the molecular structure for the vaccine and where it attaches and how it works, they could easily recognize, oh yeah, that's the molecule that was used for the HIV vaccine. That was a big flop anyway. So we're starting to see things or hear things and discover things that it was purposely hidden, but the forces now, patriots have woken up.
Yeah.
People are not sitting back anymore and letting shit go to hell. People are really speaking up and pushing legislation, pushing their Congress people, their representatives to be more transparent. And it's kind of happening. I'll see where it's going to go, because there's still those higher level forces that sort of keep things, where they need to be. But forums like this, you and I talking, open conversation, nobody's attacking anybody. We're presenting, as far as we know, the best information we know. We're intelligent folk, right?
Yep.
Regular run-of-the-mill U.S. citizen people. This is the opportunity for us to share thoughts, ideas. This is the basis of democracy, So I think people are getting a little bit more tuned into what might have been happening behind the curtains,
If you had to spitball and try to make sense of why there would be such a strong push to get a needle in every arm, to totally railroad any sort of early treatment with something that makes your body make a spike protein that could be a lifelong autoimmune disorder. I mean, how do you steer away from the conspiracy theory of, population control? Like, what's happening there? Why was it so imperative to, say that ivermectin is a horse dewormer, or say that hydroxychloroquine is, the orange man's, nasty pill? Like, what do you think was happening there? Is it about money? I mean, obviously you always trace the money, but
Well, I mean, there are some really interesting conferences and conversations that happened in 2018 and 2019 that people like Fauci and Bill Gates were involved in. And they talked about a plandemic.
yep.
There was something that was going to happen. I mean, you could hear Fauci was like plain as day in a presentation at a conference that he was at. And he goes, we're going to see a pandemic here. And, and it was like 2019.
Yeah.
We're going to see one.
I don't know if it was Event 201, if that's what it was called. It was this like role play of what would happen if a pandemic
Correct.
or when a pandemic would hit.
That's right.
And then sure enough, the next year it happens, and it happens with a virus that was being worked on in labs funded by the people who were telling us that it was going to happen.
Right. Right.
And is this to get all their friends rich? There's the other thing too with Bill Gates, where he does this talk, TED-style talk years ago, and talks about how through vaccines we can lower population numbers. And some people say he misspoke, but if you listen to it,
Yeah.
it's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah. And he was in a day or two ago, he was talking about masks, wearing masks. And he says, I don't know what the problem is. He's saying this while he's maskless, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, what's the problem with wearing masks? It's not like, society tells you to wear pants, and nobody has a problem with wearing pants. Why wouldn't you just wear a mask like you wear pants? I swear to God, it came out of his mouth. And people are like, well, Mr. Gates, I think that wearing pants, you could still breathe.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, what kind of logic? I mean, that's how disconnected these people are from reality. When you're an elite at that level with those kind of billions of dollars, your world is completely different than what yours and I's is.
Yeah.
And it just shows the lunacy. I mean, I think it's a complete insanity of these people that they think that they're in charge of some sort of, when democracy doesn't work that way. When we see that insanity, I hope people are really waking up to this insanity, because we live in clown world, man. I'd hate to overuse that statement, but holy moly. Families have been broken up. Friends have, like you said, unfriended in Facebook.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
What the hell? I remember standing in line in Publix 3 years ago, talking to a Democrat, talking to an independent, talking to a Republican. Nobody had a problem with each other. We all talked about the same stuff. We weren't at each other's throats. Why all of a sudden is there this, your side, my side? This is created. This was not here before. So why is it here now?
Is it the 48 laws of power? One of them is divide and conquer. It's like we are being splintered and pit against our neighbors. Early on in the pandemic, when it was like this 6-foot rule, don't gather in groups larger than 10 people, we were trained then with death tickers that our neighbors are dangerous, and it was like psychological warfare that we've all been subject to. And again, this is my opinion, and I'm not some brilliant dude, and I also deal with these conspiracy concepts, but more often than not, these conspiracy theories end up being what was the case that was happening, and it
Yes.
gets titled as misinformation,
Right.
and then like the lab leak theory, that was totally conspiracy theory. You would get banned from social media for saying it.
Yep.
And now it is like the most plausible cause of where this pandemic came from. And it seems like the people at the top orchestrated this.
Yeah.
And is it to just get their friends rich at the cost of people's lives?
million-dollar question, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's money. I mean, it's power through money, perhaps. There's people in this world that think that they can live a better life for you and have a better plan for you than you have for yourself and your family. I think that's the problem.
Right.
There's people that don't understand at the core of being human, there's a freedom that yearns. You can't, in history, in all of the histories of the world, in failed communist states like Venezuela and Cuba and Yugoslavia, you know, you can't talk to me about socialism and communism when I come from Cuba.
Yeah.
And if you think that's a better system, I don't see you guys swimming from this coast to Cuba.
Correct.
I see everybody jumping on rafts made on 57 Chevys, risking their lives and their children's lives
to escape.
to just go 90 miles across the shore. For what? Because that's a heaven, a socialist heaven there, because they have the best healthcare system? Dude, that's a lie. All of that is a lie. It's a propaganda that's been fed. People wearing Che Guevara shirts. I've seen a black guy, right, an African-American guy wearing a Che Guevara shirt.
Now, who's Che Guevara? I know. I can picture the face.
Che Guevara is that famous face with a beret.
Yep, that's now on
if
like.
you think of
like,
Rage Against the Machine,
you can get at Forever 21 a T-shirt with his face
exactly.
on. Okay, so what was his impact in history?
His claim of fame was he traveled Latin America with Fidel Castro as a revolutionary, and he was a man for the people, and he's here to liberate you from the capitalist pig, and he's going to give you free health care and all that stuff. And then, where in the back of the truck, he's assassinating blacks and gays.
No shit.
Because they don't belong in society. So here's an ideologue, a guy with these ideologies of liberating people from the grips of capitalism, yet he's, assassinating people behind the truck because you're black, and saying those are the dirtiest people that ever existed. And this is written journals from him. So I showed him a passage. I said, "You want to know what this guy said about you?" And I showed him a passage of one of the books that he wrote, because there was a famous movie too that they made with the Motorcycle Diaries, where they talk about his life and he travels Latin America, and they painted him in this grandeur picture of being a hero. And the guy was an assassin, and eventually he was hunted down and killed by the Bolivian police because he was just creating chaos all throughout Latin America. So people wear that shirt like, oh, I'm a man for the people. It's like, dude, you have no clue. So my point is, we are repeating history. So take humanities out of our school system. Take history away, take music, take art, and you're going back to Orwellian 1984. Destroy the books, destroy the history, so that I could start you again. Because you don't know if you're in a cage, if that's all you've ever lived is in a cage.
Right.
That's what you think it should be like. You think you should wear a mask for the rest of your life. I don't want to live in that world. No way. I can't picture it. It goes against everything, every core being of what the United States was built for. And we still are the shining beacon, no matter how shitty people think the United States is. And I've traveled throughout. I've traveled to China. I've been to Japan. I've been to Australia. And people hate us, right? The rest of the world hates us. But they eventually say, and I can't wait to go.
I want to go live the American dream.
I want to go.
A chance at the American dream.
And I'm like, okay, well, you just told me how much you hate. He goes, do you hate us because we have these opportunities, And, there's a really interesting conversation about equal opportunity and equity of outcome and
right.
equity of opportunity.
Right.
You and I different backgrounds. I grew up where I grew up. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Fort Lauderdale and then South Florida, then lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for years,
Right.
kind of nomadic a bit, but all up and down the East Coast.
Jewish heritage, you mentioned.
Correct.
Right. So, the chosen people have always been oppressed, but you guys have somehow overcome, right? No matter what. So it's not like that can't happen. That can happen with my black Jamaican friends that grew up in Miami. They're black the same, but they don't have the same complaints. They're like, dude, I kicked ass. I went to school.
Right.
I got out of the hole that I came in here, and I came with a disadvantage. I was an immigrant from another country. Jamaica is still another country.
Right.
But you talk to the black Jamaicans in Miami, dude, they're the hardest working people I've ever met. And they chase education like there's no tomorrow. Those are opportunities that they had. We've had a black president. There's black mayors and governors. There's people in Congress that have been elected from the 60s. You
Right.
know?
Black people lead in entertainment and athletics.
Yeah.
And I mean, how much of that is also like, Kanye explains it as being like, a slave to the entertainment industry, which is, there's all sorts of weird shit that happens there too.
Yeah. That's weird. I mean, Holly weird.
Yeah.
I can't, there's no way to explain what goes on there, to be honest. That place runs on its own rules.
It does. And it's interesting how much it's actually tied in with the government. I think there was a lot of initial ties in early Hollywood, early music, that like a lot of these, like Jim Morrison, his dad was involved in the Gulf of Tonkin.
Right.
There's like these weird ties.
That was a false flag.
That was a false flag
that's
thing, where it was like we said that a ship was blown up, and that was to get us into Vietnam. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And it never happened.
Correct.
And there's also the Bay of Pigs. Is
Yes.
that was also going to be a false flag situation? Am I getting that right?
The Bay of Pigs was more of a distraction than a false flag. The false flag in Cuba was to start the Spanish-American War. In 1901, the USS Maine was blown up in Havana Harbor, and it was blamed on the Spanish, and that was an excuse for the United States to attack the Spanish. And that's how we ended up with Puerto Rico and those properties that we have now in the Caribbean. There's the U.S. government for its entire history has been involved in very shady stuff. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day about experiments done on people. MK Ultra. Have you heard that stuff?
Absolutely.
Tuskegee Airmen.
Absolutely.
That's why the black community doesn't want to get vaccinated, because of the history of blacks being used by the U.S. government for experimentation. And if you don't remember that was just 40 years ago.
Yeah. Well, everybody forgets.
If you forget that, I mean, and that's why the educational system is important, because if you don't teach that history in our schools, you're not giving these kids an opportunity to understand that, hey, we're in a political system where I do have the power to make change, to oust. I don't have to be a passive pawn here. I have a say, and I think we're trying to wipe that out. I mean, I'm not sure. I hope that I think there's going to be a minor revolution here now in the midterm elections in November of this year. We're going to see. I'm really kind of hopeful. I don't care who takes over. I think that there's just going to be a lot of exposed shit that's going to influence which way things are going to go in the next 2 to 4 years.
So if we want to see change, the best thing to do is educate ourselves on who's running for these positions in our area. Everybody waits to vote for president, but there are so many other elections that can really create change, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's why states have their autonomy, because you could have red states, blue states, right, at the end of the day. And what has happened to California? What has happened to New York? I'm surrounded by New Yorkers now in my neighborhood.
Yeah, they wanted to get the hell out of there.
They got out of there.
Yep.
So we vote with our feet, right? And now,
well said.
California is going to be in their biggest deficit of tax. All their tax base hauled ass. New York, the same. So those states are at risk of becoming even worse. Crime-ridden, homelessness. San Francisco, the beautiful city that was San Francisco, there's feces. Feces and hypodermic needles in the
everywhere.
nicest neighborhoods in San Francisco.
The fear is, though, is that these people escape, quote unquote, these New York and California, and they move to these red states where they have freedom. But then, hopefully they don't vote the same way that they were voting where they were, and create that same thing, here for us. You know, I've never really been involved in politics until the past couple years, where I realized, like, the politicians, it's important who's leading. Right? It's because when shit goes haywire,
right,
you need to make sure you have a leader who's going to make objective decisions, based on your freedom and your safety, and thank God for DeSantis, thank God that we were down here and not in California or in New York.
Yeah, I agree.
It's crazy.
And I mean, it's amazing. And as a result of all those New Yorkers moving here and Californians, real estate prices, I mean, it's unaffordable now. Nobody could buy a house in Florida if you were a Floridian, because they're selling their homes that were 3 times the price in those states. They were paying $15,000 tax every year, and now they come to a state where there's no income tax, and they're paying half of what they were paying for real estate tax.
Yeah, my wife and I are dealing with it now. We're going to sell our property because we want to take advantage of the market as a seller, but finding a place to go. I mean, we looked at a 1-bedroom apartment up the street here. This is a warehouse district, an industrial district with a brand new apartment complex, 700 square feet, 1 bedroom, $2,400 a month rent, right there.
Wow, that's New York prices.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Almost.
Yeah. And what, I don't know what kind of, I've heard that there's going to be another real estate crash, but it might take another 5-something years. I don't know, man. What I do know is it's a wild time to be alive. I do feel kind of blessed to be in this, to be here, to witness it, and, blessed for the opportunity to still be able to build business and build community within that business, and then have conversations with interesting people, Jose, I really appreciate you sitting down today and kind of sharing your views. And I think this is a great example of the value of conversation and what an interesting perspective you have as a Cuban-American who, works. Now, do you work for the FDA or do you work for the companies who are trying to get approved by the FDA?
Yeah, I usually do consulting for small startups that are trying to get some new technology through the FDA process.
That's cool. I think I got to get you linked up with my buddies at the International Ozone here with their hydroxyl generator. I'll tell you more about it. It's something that they're very interested in. But what I was getting at is that being a Cuban American, I think people would automatically put you into a box of like liberal left, but you seem to have pretty centrist views, and maybe even like I just think it's really interesting, and it's an important perspective to be shown,
If you go to Miami, the vast majority of the Cuban immigrants that fled communism are solid Republicans, no matter what. Even if they benefited from, I grew up on food stamps, welfare, government cheese, free lunch in high school, all that embarrassing stuff. And I would go to the food stamp office with my mom. We would take the bus because that's what people that have food stamps, that's how they get around town, right? Well, we'd show up, and I would ask my mom, why are these people showing up in a brand new Cadillac? So now I see the same thing. I see these people that are sitting at the bus stop, waiting for a bus, with an iPhone 13 and with tattoos head to toe. How the hell
can you afford
that?
it?
And you're taking the bus. So priorities are completely out the window, man.
Right.
How do you build an economy like that? Things are upside down. There's no predictability except in, fads and social media. I mean, kids making billions of dollars on NFTs.
Yeah. I have a young
How
lady
is that-
coming on next week who lives in our neighborhood. I saw her. I'm walking the dog. She's outside, two guys with cameras dancing. And I said, What do you guys up to? Oh, just making a TikTok video. She's like, you want to follow me? Sure. She's our neighbor, right? I go to her TikTok. She has 1.4 million followers on her TikTok. Right? Could you imagine being in a position where a 22-year-old girl is, can communicate with 1.4 million people?
And making 10 grand a week. Now, is that sustainable?
That's what I'm going to talk to her about.
Yeah.
Is like, what do you do now?
Right.
You know,
Right.
what's the end game here?
Right.
And I'm interested to see how a young person who gets this taste of fame and how does that, what is the sustainability with that, and where do you go from there? Because I mean, in that case, it is awesome if you get the right kids to get 1.4 million followers and they share a message that can change what's happening. It could be very good,
Right.
Hopefully she,
She wasn't taking off her clothes.
no, she's a beautiful girl, and she makes dancing twerk videos. Like her one video that she has pinned to the top, and this is not to discredit her at all. She's
We
a
won't mention her by
a very talented dancer, and I'm excited to get to know her as a person. But she's got 20 million views on a video where she's teaching how to twerk. 20 million views. And I would imagine that the people who are watching that are not women who want to learn how to twerk.
No, certainly not.
But this is the world that we live in now. There's a new show called Hype House, and it's about these kids who live in a mansion in California, and collectively they probably have 100 million followers on TikTok, and they're constantly, trying to just do the next outrageous thing on film to, like you said, to stay relevant, I would love the opportunity to have 1.4 million people listening, but then again, that's a little scary. I don't want to be added to that 54 people who were fucking suicided,
Well, I don't think you're saying anything that controversial anyway.
No, but you never know. And this goes to like the whole privacy thing, where I have people who tell me, I don't care if people are listening to what I say. I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, that's until what you're saying is said to be wrong and against the narrative. There's this whole thing now with like domestic terrorism. Parents who are going to PTA meetings are being called domestic terrorists, and now all of a sudden you could be in danger. Your freedom could be in danger for having an opinion. And also anti-American. This is not American.
Yeah. All motivated by some political hack memo that was written, by the Attorney General. And it's like, really, you're really labeling the soccer mom that is getting a little bit loud at a school board meeting as a domestic terrorist, really? And also saying that the biggest threat internally in the United States is white supremacy. Like, is anybody really believing this stuff?
People do believe it. People do believe it. And I don't know what that is. People want to be led. People want to feel like there's somebody fighting for justice for them, but they don't want to realize that it's a bit of a distraction. It's that whole divide and conquer thing. Listen, you go to any local watering hole in your neighborhood, and you're going to see that we all fucking love each other.
That's right.
You know what I mean? You sit down and have conversations with people from different cultures and backgrounds and beliefs. I mean, you're not going to do what you do on social media and tell them to fuck off.
Right.
Usually when you're face to face with somebody, you can kind of find some common ground because we're humans and we need each other.
There's still decency left in the world. We just have to pry a little more to find it.
Yeah.
But when I have opportunities like this, sit down, exchange ideas, communicate, man, it's what we need more. I really, I appreciate you letting me come on here, and we met that night here and trivia night. But from this point on, this stuff is gold, man. I'm gonna follow you and
thank you.
keep
Jose.
listening to conversations that you bring. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it very much. It's funny. I've said it several times that when I do these sit downs, I've done a lot of them with people who I know. And when I do the ones with people who I don't know or haven't gotten to know yet, I get very nervous. Like, oh God, what are we going to talk about? And I hope this conversation, and every time it turns out to be like, wow, what a great fucking conversation that was. And I think that's a good example for life. Like, stop having these preconceived notions that you're not going to be able to find common ground with the people around you. Jose, I really appreciate you, man. You're a very interesting dude. And I don't know if you're big into social media at all, but if people are interested in your ideologies and want to keep up with your happenings, do you have a social media you'd like to share? No obligation to do so.
No. I mean, I just started up, going a little bit on what we were talking about. I just started up a foundation, the Palm Beach Philosophical Society. I'm studied philosophy in school. Have it tattooed on my body. I take it pretty serious.
What's the tattoo say?
Philosophy.
Ah, I love that.
So my idea is to sort of spread critical thinking to people like you and I.
Yep.
The Joe Blows of the world.
Yep.
Right? Perhaps illustrate the value of being a little bit more critical to what you see, hear, listen, and because it takes work to think, it takes effort, and most people are just want to watch cat videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm guilty of that too, but
cat videos are cute.
Dude, are you kidding me? It's, that and porn is what launched the internet anyway. So.
Absolutely. Oh, I just watched that Pam and Tommy series. Have you watched it yet?
No, I haven't seen it.
It's crazy. It's very well done.
I bet.
The
reviews look good.
The Palm Beach Philosophical
Society, Instagram.
And is that what it is with the word "the" at the beginning?
The Palm Beach Philosophical Society.
Cool.
Yes.
We'll share it in the description of this video.
Thanks.
I'll follow, and
it's kind of fresh. It's kind of new, but
that's important.
But it's didn't exist. I'm going to turn it into a nonprofit organization to try to do in-services with schools, kind of reintroduce the humanities. Little by little, you've been hearing the schools, their music programs defunded, right?
I say it all the time.
Art,
the first things
drama.
that are cut in budget are arts, creativity. These are things that get people out of bad situations.
That's right.
And for some reason, those are always where the budget cuts happen.
So, creative writing, all those things that I think are important in making you a good human citizen of the world. If I could promote that stuff, dude, that would be the love of life that I would have. I've worked plenty hard in the corporate world doing consulting. If I could jump into that and have these conversations all day long and find a way to pay my bills, whatever I have left in my life, I'd be happy as a clam.
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling that it's going to do very well, and I'm going to support it in every way I can.
Cool,
I tell
man.
a lot of the people who come on here to speak and sit with me and speak with me that we built this podcast little studio here, not just for me to have these conversations, but for the community to have an opportunity. If you don't have the equipment or the space, if you wanted to do your own weekly, monthly, bi-weekly podcast from right here, this equipment is here for you to use. So we would love that. I'll help in any way I can getting it started. At the very least, I'd love to have you on as a regular guest so we continue these conversations.
Dude,
but if you'd like to do your own podcast from here, this equipment's here for you to use.
What if we say that it's born out of this podcast?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Like a spin-off.
Yeah, it's fantastic, dude.
Awesome.
I love it.
I like that.
Mr. Josè Cabrera, this has been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, man.
It's nice to get to know you, and hopefully this is the beginning of a long friendship, man.
I think so.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
you guys,
it.
Thanks for joining us today, live from Hakuna. Follow Jose with the Palm Beach Philosophical Society. Awesome things on the horizon. If you like what you saw here today, please like, comment, subscribe, and keep doing the next right thing. Appreciate y'all. Have a good one.
Peace.
Later. Thanks, dude.
Cool, man. That went well.
Okay.